Welcome to the course on fluid mechanics. This is the first lecture and I am the course coordinator. My name is Sanjeev Sami. So as we know by the title of this course, this is a course in fluid mechanics. Now, what exactly are fluids? We know that there are three states of matter, and these are solids, liquids, and gases. And of these three states, liquids and gases are what are treated as fluids. Any substance which flows. For the purposes of this course and as engineering students, this definition is not sufficient. But before we come to a more technical definition of fluid, of what is a fluid, let us see why do we want to study fluid mechanics. Why do we study fluid mechanics? And well, two of the most common things which we have in nature are air and water, and their importance is there for everyone to see. And both air and water are what would come under fluids. So, as engineers, when we study fluid mechanics, what do we want to know? And as you know, when we talk of mechanics, there are two things: kinematics, which deals with velocity, position, acceleration, any type of motion, the description is done by kinematics, and the other is dynamics, which looks at what causes or prevents the motion. And it is here that we come across things like forces and moments. So, one of the most common concern we have is when a fluid flows past an object, how much force does it exert on the object? And this could be something very important. And conversely, we would also like to know how much force should be applied on an object so that it starts or moves in a fluid in a particular way or on a particular path. And for both of these, a study of fluid mechanics is very important. If we just try to uh, just introduce you to some of the forces which fluids apply on bodies. The first force we can think of is the force of buoyancy. A vertical force applied on an object when it is fully or partially immersed in a fluid. So such a force is what we call as a buoyancy force. Then we also know that there is a pressure force. Any object in a fluid is subject to what is called the pressure force, and this pressure force is a surface force which acts normal to the surface and is exerted by the fluid on a solid in contact with it. We will do a more detailed definition of a pressure force, of pressure and pressure forces later in the course. But then there are two other terms we hear of. One is a drag force. If an object is moving in a fluid, so we have an object moving in a fluid with a velocity v. So suppose if this, our x and y directions are like this, so velocity v, this is in the minus I direction. A force exerted by the fluid which tries to hinder the motion of the object this is called a drag force. So if the velocity is in the minus I direction, drag force will be the force exerted by the fluid in the plus I direction. So if this is moving and then the fluid will try to slow this object down, so a drag force is a force in the direction of velocity but opposite to that. So opposing the direction of velocity, the force is called a drag force. And a force which is applied by the fluid in the direction perpendicular to the motion of the object, this force is called the lift force. And in the above example, lift force will be the force in the J and K directions. Motion is in the I direction. The force in perpendicular directions to the motion is called a lift force. Now, when a parachute is falling down, an object is falling down in a parachute, then the object is tending to move down, and the parachute is slowed down by a drag force, because this is the direction of motion of the parachute, and the surrounding air applies a drag force which slows down the parachute. So therefore, drag force can also be advantageous. Obviously, this would be a disadvantageous force when a car is moving, is trying to accelerate, drag force will try to slow down. If we look at swing of a cricket ball, a ball, so if let's say this is the bowling side wicket, and if this is the batsman who is batting, the bowler bowls a ball, the ball is moving in this direction from the bowler to the batsman. This is the direction of the ball. A force which is in the perpendicular direction is a lift force, and the lift force on the ball is what causes the ball to swing. Of course, the most common example of lift force is when we look at an aeroplane which is flying. So it has the weight acting in the downward direction. There's a lift force in the upward direction. A drag, so plane is moving like this. A drag force tries to slow it down, and there is a thrust which is provided by the engine of the plane which makes it move forward. So in this context, the name lift came, that it was a force which tends to lift up a body. But by definition, lift is a force in a direction perpendicular to the motion of the body, and therefore the swing in a cricket ball is caused by a lift force. So these are some of the forces. Now let me show you a particular effect which happened because of the wind which was falling down. So
that you wouldn't believe possible unless you could see it as you do now. There's an automobile caught on the heaving roadway. The 11,000-ton center span twists and strains the giant cables that support it. Cables of 6,300 wire strands, each 17 inches thick.
This I will continue later. This was a bridge called Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which was just made. It was about 6 months old, and in November 1940, there was a particular wind pattern which was flowing past the bridge, and the bridge started heaving. And this is what you just saw, and let's now continue and let's see what happened to the bridge. See the bridge which is moving in the wave shape. See the bridge which is now moving like this.
Back out of the danger zone, all stricken spectators are driven to safety as the bridge gyrates like a nightmare high above the river, twisting, turning, curling. The lone motorist is forced to abandon the car. He has but a few minutes in which to save himself. Face to face with fate, his destiny hanging in the balance. Will he heed the last warning or perish with the doomed structure? But he saved himself by seconds.
Just see how the bridge is swinging, torsion, twisting and
No
swinging.
structure of steel and concrete can stand such a strain. Steel girders buckle and giant cables snap like puny thread. There it goes!
And eventually the bridge fell down. So this bridge fell down because of the forces which were applied by the wind, and that is what the effect of the wind on the bridge was. And we would like to study some of these effects, and that is what we can do if we can do study fluid mechanics properly. The air which flew past the bridge applied some forces on the bridge which caused it to twist and oscillate. It started oscillating. Previously it was thought that this was because of a resonance type of phenomena where the vortices which were formed when the bridge from the bridge, they matched the natural frequency of the bridge. But it was later there's a phenomena called aerostatic flutter, and that is what was considered to be the reason why this bridge failed. Let me also show you another topical simulation which we do in fluid mechanics, and this is a simulation of the Sinet room where the red particles are the infected bacteria, and with 4 fans running and 1 window, it shows how much time do these red particles take to leave the room. And this simulation was done in the context of COVID-19, a CFD simulation done by a professor at IIT Delhi, just to show that if 4 fans are running, how much time does it take for the air to clear the room. And such type of simulations one can do if we study fluid mechanics. So therefore, a study of fluid mechanics is quite important, and I leave this particular example for you to see from this particular topic, and that is, it gives you a brief explanation of why planes fly. Maybe you may not be able to understand this now, but once you do more parts of this course, you will be able to see, be able to understand why planes fly. And as this article explains, for a long time we have been explaining it using wrong effect, but this gives some explanation. So at your leisure time you can read it, and maybe we will come back to this at a later time in the course. So having seen all this, let us now try to give a definition of a fluid. And before I give the definition, let me explain the term shear force. Maybe some of you would have seen this term in your mechanics course. Suppose, and this, please get familiar with this, we have an arbitrary volume V. We will write volume with a V with a hatch in it in this course. And this volume has a surface S. Now what is the difference between a volume and a surface? Let's try to look at this with a simple object which I draw. I will draw a cube and then try to explain the difference between the surface and the volume. If I look at this cube, the surface means the 6 sides which are at the boundary of the cube. So when I talk of the surface S or surface area A, I'll use them interchangeably in this course. That means I'm talking of these 6 edges of the cube which bound the volume. So surface will be bounding a volume. So when I say surface S, I'm only on the surfaces of the cube. But when I say the volume V, then in the volume V, you have to travel not only on the surface, but also at each point in the cube. So when we talk of a volume V, we talk of not we talk not only of the surface but also inside the cube at each point. And clearly the dimensions of S or A are L square, whereas the volume, the dimension is L cube. So now coming back to our general volume V with a surface S, we choose an infinitesimal, which means a very small area A on the surface, which we call as ds. So on the surface I choose a very small area and I call it as ds. N is the normal to this surface ds. If this area is not planar, then the direction of n will change from point to point. But because ds is infinitesimal, it will have a normal. Now normal means perpendicular. The perpendicular can either point, in general, when we talk of a perpendicular, the perpendicular can point either outward or inward to the surface. So it's a direction which is there, but n, when we say, it will always denote an outward normal, which means it's perpendicular to the surface, pointing outside the volume. So this will be the normal n. Now, on the surface, force can act, and we know one such force is the pressure force which acts on the surface. Now this force which acts, this can be along any direction. So what we can do is, let's say Fs is the surface force acting on ds, or maybe we can use dfs if we want. It's just a force which is acting on ds. Now this force will have three components. In general, we can divide a vector, if it's a three-dimensional case, along three directions. One component of these three will be parallel to n. It could be either along plus n or minus n. And two components will be perpendicular to n. So on this area, there is one force on that element which is along this n direction, and then there will be two forces, two components which will be perpendicular to n, and we can call them as T1 and T2, and both of these will be in a direction which is tangent to the area. N is perpendicular to the area. So now the component of F along n, this is what we call as the normal force. And component of F perpendicular to n, this is called the shear force. So this component, in general, there will be two components, T1 and T2. So these are also the tangential components. The shear force is always acting in a direction tangent to the surface. So this is what we have defined as a shear force. Now let's come to the definition of fluid. And the definition of fluid is, a fluid is a substance which deforms when a shear force acts on it. Now, this is just half the definition, and we will improve this by two qualifying phrases. So, we will improve this by saying fluid is a substance. So, we'll generalize this slightly, because a solid will also deform when a shear force is acting on a solid. And I'll explain this in a moment. Let me first give the complete definition of fluid. So, fluid is a substance which deforms continuously under the application of a shear force, and we will add another qualification here. So we have added the word continuously as compared to the previous case, and the other thing which we add is however small it may be. So if a shear force is applied on a fluid, it will start deforming, and it continuously deforms till the shear force is applied, even if the shear force is very, very small. Now, if we try to compare this behavior with a solid, on a solid, when a force is applied, solid also deforms. But after some time, the deformation stops. It comes to an equilibrium. It does not continue to deform. And so in a solid, what happens is the force which is applied is related to the deformation, because after some time the deformation stops, and by measuring the deformation you can have an idea of the force. And an example of this which you have studied, though it is not a shear force, is that of Hooke's law, where the law says that stress is proportional to strain. So here strain is nothing but the deformation and stress is nothing but the force. So the force is related to the deformation. But in case of a fluid, even if a small force is applied, and this is, we qualify this by saying a shear force, because if a normal force is applied, a fluid may or may not move. But if a very small shear force is applied, the fluid starts to deform. And possibly this is the word which we use in common language is flow, and it keeps on deforming. Then the question we ask is, does the fluid resist the deformation? And it is here that we answer this by just trying to see what is the effect of force. A force, when applied to a particle, causes acceleration. But what we find is that when shear force is applied on a fluid particle, it does not continue to accelerate. On a rigid body, when you apply force, it has a constant acceleration which is related to it through its mass. Force is equal to ma, and so the velocity keeps on increasing. But in case of a fluid, what we find is that when a shear force is applied, then the resistance of the fluid is felt through a rate of deformation, and the force, shear force, which is applied, or which we will later on say the force per unit area, which we'll call as the shear stress, this is related to the rate of strain, not to the strain. And in a solid, this was related directly to the strain, but in a fluid, it is related to the rate of strain. And this property of fluid which resists the applied shear force is called viscosity. So now there's a very basic law which is called Newton's law of viscosity. So now let's look at a rectangular element of fluid. This is the x direction, this is the y direction. And what Newton's law of viscosity tells us is that the shear stress on a fluid is proportional to the rate of strain. So this is the statement of Newton's laws of viscosity, and fluids which follow this law, they are called Newtonian fluids. And this, even though this is a very simple law, most common fluids, common simple fluids I should add, like air, water, gasoline, these under normal conditions can be treated like Newtonian fluids. So these fluids under common conditions, we treat them and we call them as Newtonian fluid. Okay, so but fluids like gooey fluids, things like ketchup or polymer solutions, these are non-Newtonian, which means in those fluids the shear stress is not a linear function of the rate of strain. Now let's try to see what we mean by this in terms of the quantities in a fluid flow. Let's assume that there is a fluid which is flowing, in which we choose an element which is rectangular. Let this be a one-dimensional flow, which means the velocity is equal to u of I. That means everywhere the fluid is flowing in a straight line only along the x direction, but this velocity is a function of y. So that means If I look at the velocity profile, it could be something like this. It could be more complex function. So this is the velocity u as a function of y. So this is u, this is y, and it is either a linear or some non-linear function, and there is only one component depending only upon y. So now here, let's say this at y is equal to 0, the x-axis, the fluid is at rest. And if I look at this rectangular element, and this height of this is delta y. So now at the bottom, so this is basically, I'm talking of the origin. So here u is equal to 0, and on this u is equal to delta u. So now this is the position at time t is equal to 0. At time t is equal to delta t, this rectangular thing, at bottom the velocity is 0, on top there is a velocity delta u. So this rectangle at time delta t will become a parallelogram. Okay, and here now, what is this distance? This distance will be equal to delta u times delta t. Let this angle be theta and or delta theta. So this angle I call as delta theta. So delta theta is what we call as the shear. And from here it is very clear, tangent of delta theta is equal to delta u delta t divided by delta y. And in the limit delta t tends to 0, we say delta theta goes to 0 because it is a finite velocity. So tangent delta theta can be written as delta theta, and what we get is delta theta is equal to delta u delta t divided by delta y. So this is what tells us how much is the shear of a fluid element at a distance delta y, and the rate of the shear strain. So this is the delta theta, is the strain, shear strain. So I should have qualified along with shear, it's the shear strain. So delta theta is the shear strain, and the rate of shear strain is equal to delta theta by delta t, which is equal to delta u by delta y. And Newton's law says that the shear stress is proportional to the rate of strain. Obviously the strain we are talking of is the shear strain, and that means it is proportional to du by dy. And so what we get is tau is proportional to du by dy, and this we can write tau is equal to mu times du by dy. This mu is the constant of proportionality, and you may have used in your classes, the symbol used for this is either mu or eta, and this is called the coefficient of dynamic viscosity. Some of the books also call it just the coefficient of viscosity. The reason why we use the term dynamic here is that we also define a second coefficient called the coefficient of kinematic viscosity, and this is defined as mu divided by rho. So that is why this distinction is made. Now let's look at mu. The SI units of mu, you will see this has dimensions of m by LT, and the SI units of mu are Pascal second. When you turn this out, it is m by LT, so mass kilogram per meter second, so it's also Pascal second. Now, when we talk of the shear stress, let us generalize Newton's law of viscosity. Shear stress is force upon area, or any stress is defined as force upon area. Shear stress is one of the components of stresses. So now when we look at stress, and this you may have seen in some other courses also, this is, so I'll remove this. In general, stress is force divided by area. Now, the force is a vector. Area we also consider as a vector, so I call this vector 1 and vector 2. You will say area is a scalar, but the direction of area is given by n. And we have seen on a curved volume, on different points on the surface area, the direction of n changes. So now we have two vectors, a vector f and a vector a, whose direction is n. Now in these two vectors, the components of f could be x, y, z, and similarly area could have another three components along x, y, z. So it could be a combination also. So we have two vectors which are put together. That means now when I define stress, if I have a vector f in index notation, I write it as f sub I and or f sub j, and here this subscript j gives you the direction of f or the component of f along j direction. Now area similarly can be written as ai or aj. Again, this subscript will now give component of a along the direction I. So we will write stress with two subscripts. One subscript will give me the direction of area, and the second subscript will give me the direction of force. And if both subscripts have same value, that means I'm talking of tau xx, then such a stress will be a normal stress, because both force is in the same direction as that of the area. So this is a normal stress, and an example of normal stress is pressure. But if subscripts are different, obviously these are Cartesian coordinates, so different subscripts means these are represent mutually perpendicular directions. If they are same, there's the same direction, but if subscripts are different, then they represent mutually perpendicular directions. And then tau AB, for example, A is not equal to B, this represents a shear stress. And if we generalize and what we say is the first subscript is area, the second subscript is force. So then this is first, this is second. So therefore we can generalize Newton's law of viscosity as tau nt is equal to mu times dvt by dxn. So here now t is the tangential direction, this is the direction of motion, and n is the direction of normal to the area. So for example, the simple example which we did here, when we talk of this top face, what stress component are we talking of? In which direction, in this case here, is the shear force acting? The shear force is tending to move this element of fluid in the x direction. So the direction of shear force in this example, this is the direction of shear is x. And the direction of area on this horizontal face here, this is n and which is y. So in the simple example done above, tau nt is equal to tau yx. This was the direction of area and this is the direction of shear. And the element is being sheared in the x direction. So we have some simple problems. For example, let's say a block is moving with a velocity v and there's a thin layer of fluid which is there. This layer we say is given by delta. And if we want to find the shear force on the block due to this fluid of viscosity mu. So let's say this is the breadth, this is the height, and W is the width of the block perpendicular to the paper. So these are the dimensions H, B and W. Now we wish to find shear force on the block due to the fluid. So we look at the bottom face of the block. Now this is the direction which is perpendicular, this is the y direction, this is x. So the shear stress which we are talking of is tau yx, and this will be equal to mu times dvx by dy. And if the gap is thin, we assume a linear profile. Actually, as we will show later in the course, that the velocity profile, if the gap is thin, and I'll just speak a bit more about this just after I finish this. Let's first complete this. So this dvx by dy, we will write it as mu times v minus 0 divided by delta. So this is the shear stress, and the total shear force on the block, this will be equal to mu v by delta multiplied by the area of contact, which is equal to, in this case it is B times W. So B times W gives me the, so B times W is the area. So this is the total resisting shear force on the bottom of the block. Now here, notice this was a very simple problem. Shear was constant. So we multiplied. The general way would be you choose an elemental area dA, and on this, so you write dF on this as tau nt times dA, and then you integrate on the area A to get the shear force. So this is what you would do if the shear force is changing along the area. Then you take an elemental area and you integrate. Sometimes in rotating bodies, the net viscous force is zero, but there is a viscous torque. For example, if I have a beaker, let's say there is an annular gap in which there is fluid. The inner surface is rotating with omega, and the outer surface here is fixed. Now, in order to rotate the inner cylinder with omega, you will need a torque T. And what causes the resistance to the movement of cylinder? So suppose initially everything is at rest, and then you start to move this inner cylinder and you rotate, and to maintain this inner cylinder with a constant velocity omega, you will need a torque T, and the resistance to this rotation is coming because of the fluid. And here, if I look at this inner surface, I choose an elemental area dA. Let me choose an elemental area dA on the left side and an area dA1 and dA2 on the right side. Of course, this is a cylindrical element, so everywhere all along the circumference there will be a dA1 and there will be a dA2. Now, motion of cylinder along dA1, so this is rotating like this, so along dA1 is outside the paper, and along dA2 is inside the paper. So here, when you calculate the shear force on these 2 points, on these 2 elements, dA1 and dA2, these shear force will be in opposite directions. And so, when we calculate the net viscous or shear force on the cylinder, it will be 0. Because everywhere you will be able to find one point, and on a diametrically opposite point, the force will be in the other direction. So this force will be 0, but what we find is there is a net viscous torque, and this is not 0. So here there is a viscous torque, and you'll solve this problem in the tutorial, but what you will see is that there is a relation between torque and omega, and in this relation mu obviously comes in because shear stress. Now when I talk of shear stress here, realize R is the direction of area and the tangential direction here is theta. So the shear stress which we talk of is tau r theta, and when we talk of tau r theta, this will be equal to mu times dv theta by dr, and therefore mu comes in this picture. So this becomes a way of measuring mu. You measure omega and you measure the torque T, and then using the relation which you will get, you can find omega. And such a device is called a viscometer. So this is where we end this class, and we will move from here in the next lecture. Goodbye.